So what's he like as a student? And why didn't he become the next head of the academy? Vesuvius is the one who gets picked to do that. And so he leaves the island of Lesbos, where he gets married and has a nice few years until he's called from there to teach Alexander, the son of Philip of Macedonia. Philippa means lover of horses. Phila, Pippa, horse, right? So he's a horse master or whatever. Alex means savior. Andros, men. So he's the savior of men, literally his name. Yes, Ali.
Are we going to talk about Diogenes in this class?
Yes.
Okay, I'll save it then.
I'll be careful though. He's famous for doing some really, I'm not going to come in naked. It's just not how I'm going to, present it. See, there I go, already saying things that, I should have thought, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Well, in any case, Diogenes, the cynic, the dog philosophy, kaine or sine, where we get the word for dog. Well, they did, that was the word dog, so it's the dog philosophy. But Aristotle was born in Stagira, which is up, actually, I don't think it's even in Greece, I think it's in Macedonia. Macedonia, by the way, is not actually part of Greece. I mean, they still fight one another, I guess. Never been there myself, actually. But so Alexander really wasn't Greek, in a way. I don't know how you resolve that. He was Macedonian, but, they called them Hellenes, I guess, which is what the Greeks called the Greeks, I think still today. And it's not, as I was curious too. I thought, well, is it because Helen of Troy? No, it's not, apparently. It's something else, maybe, I don't know. But in any case, his mother and father were both physicians at the time. In fact, his father was the court physician to Philip. So that's how they had a particular, networking connection with Philip, who was the king of the Macedonians at the time. And Alexander was his son. And when he was 17, he was sent to study with Aristotle. Actually, wait a minute. Aristotle was at 17 sent to study with Plato's Academy. I'm not sure at what age Alexander was sent to study with Aristotle. In fact, Aristotle was sent to study to go to live with Alexander for 2 years. So it's a little bit different. But so the interesting connection there is, if you want to continue it, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander the Great, right? So there's an interesting connection there, as Aristotle's most famous student was Alexander the Great, and put into practice many of the things that Aristotle taught him, actually, to great effect. In any case, both of his parents were physicians. They apparently had died, and the uncle was the one in charge of him, and he was the one that sent him to study at the academy. And he spent roughly 20 years there, both as a student and then as a teacher in the academy. And then Plato died, and as you heard in the little bit of the video that I showed, he was hoping to become the next head of the academy. He wasn't, so he left, went to Lesbos. Eventually, he comes back to Athens, and when Alexander is the king of all of Greece, and he comes back to Athens and founds a school just a couple blocks sort of down the road from the academy called the Lyceum. It was called that because the temple where he met his students out in front was the Lyceum of Apollo. So it was a temple. But in any case, so you notice we get the word academy, lots of places are called academy. Academus was a man who owned that property and gave it to Plato for his school. So it's been called Academus, the academy, whatever, if you try to figure out where that came from. Lyceum, we have a lot of schools that are also called lyceums. Lyceae, I don't know. Remember the plural problem we have? How does that work? But the overlap with Plato, he loves those who love the ideas. He doesn't actually refer to Plato by name. Apparently it was improper in writing to refer to someone by name, I guess, at the time. So he refers to Plato by saying those who love the ideas, because that's Plato's invention. But I love truth more. And I was, of course, really cool that you guys said, is this subjective? All of this business that Plato was giving us? Absolutely. I think I mentioned that proof hadn't been invented yet. And in a way, it isn't. And part of the problem for the relationship is that Aristotle didn't think that anything existed that didn't have substance. And if you remember, just before we left last class, I asked a couple intriguing questions. One was on the divided line. We even went, I think, just to this particular idea here. Oh, that's not going to help. Oh, there it is. Okay, nice big diagram. So I mentioned, this first section is usually thought of as like dreams, and I mentioned a bad dream I was having. Fortunately, I woke up and realized none of that was real. Right? And you can also think of the hallucinations that people have, right? If you're out in the desert, and you're dying of thirst, and off in the distance you see a Coca-Cola vending machine, and you get over to it, and then you realize it's a Pepsi machine. So you find, that was that was a commercial. I'm just piggybacking on a funny commercial. But then you get to this section here. We know those things are not real, right? Even though they're happening now in our minds, right? So if you were thinking, what's my experience at this moment? It's having this dream. And sometimes they even seem real, right? But one of the cool things about dreams is you wake up afterwards and you realize it was just a dream. And hallucinations, the road being weird in front of, all that, you realize that's not real, you say, right? But then we get to this piece and we think, well, this is reality. And Aristotle would agree with that, that this is the real. But Plato didn't. Plato was trying to explain how we know things, and he was arguing that the ideas are abstract, invisible, still created, by the way, somehow. And if you're familiar with the Nicene Creed, the creed of the first Christian creed from 352, anybody remember offhand? What is the Nicene Creed? Creed, by the way, means credo as in Latin. We can go to this one. So Nicene Creed 325. Is that what I said? Or did I say 352? That's okay. Nobody remembers anyway.
352.
I said 352.
That's
Thank
what
you.
I want to say.
The problem is, I love the number 52. I was
Why?
Well, I lived at 52 Wildwood Avenue, East Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, 19050. Phone number 215 Madison 7665. Madison 37665? I think I forgot a number. And I went to Monsignor Bonner, and my locker number was number 52. And my band uniform number was 52. There was a 52 in my college campus house, 529 Walnut Street. Well, my wife was born in 1952. I like 52. It shows up in lots of things, including my passwords for some reason.
I knew that.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
So someone on Karhaki is 52, 52, 52, no, there's a bunch of 52s.
How did you know? No. Okay, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Okay, so the council, this is, of course, there were lots of Christian groups. They all came together and they had to decide, what does it mean to be Christian? We have to have some kind of order. And so they came up with the Nicene Creed, the original one, and reason I brought this up was because, here we go. So if we look at the first council, it says, we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible. And there you have it. So, visible things, God made those, and the invisible things, if you ever wondered, what the heck are those are the ideas. Because for Plato, the ideas are actually the real. And this stuff is constantly changing, and therefore, by Plato's definition, not real. Because the real are unchanging. And only the abstract concepts can be that. And what Plato's trying to answer is, how do we know things? And so we have a soul, which is also, like the ideas, abstract. But there's all kinds of problems over that, right? Because it doesn't seem like our souls are unchanging, as we've discussed. Plus, it seems like we've got different classes of people. Remember the triangle, the sloppy triangle? When I finally looked on the web for a triangle of it, I found somebody else had drawn a sloppy triangle. I thought, what? You used to have, no, and it wasn't mine, it was somebody else's. And we had, there's some really beautiful ones out there. There are others that show, here's the state, here's the man, 3 different parts. And, and it starts, we're all basically fond of stuff as children, and then we grow, and some of us stay in that class, and others move on to the spirited class where social honors are more important. And then some move on, usually like around their 50s, to be interested in, wisdom or knowledge for the sake of knowledge, right? But so you get this interesting relationship, and how do you end up with people who are all going to have soul? So obviously soul has got to be in some way different. Is it that when it's fused with the body in the womb, or somewhere along that point, when does it become soul, right? You end up with different types of people. And maybe it's because there's a different kind of, relationship between the body and the soul for each of us somewhat. Who knows? It's really a messy idea. And so for Plato, we need the soul, the invisible, the ideas. That's how we get connected to them. And so for Plato, the things that we think of as real, and that Aristotle will think of as real, are not really real. And we end up then with the next set, which are the ideas that we're trying to imagine, basically. We're trying to get the concept of the good. And then we're trying to figure out, and mathematics, by the way, for those who love mathematics, seems to be exactly the model for this. Plato was a mathematician, loved mathematics. And so you get mathematics really as your ideal example of this, because we know numbers, we know their relationships. We could do the square roots, we could do the Pythagorean theorem. We can build a temple on the Acropolis that seems to be using the golden ratio, right? All that kind of thing. We could build statues that use the golden ratio. Remember, even our own bodies can seem to be following that same kind of ratio. I mentioned music. What music do you like? Obviously, we got different kinds of music. So if you think about the award things like the Oscars, you end up with different types of music for different types of things.